Hi, I am Pawan, co-founder and CTO at Wizzer. Most companies scale by adding more people. We decided to add more responsibility. Let's deep dive into the pod model, which helps Wizzer to move with speed without losing control. Distributed systems taught us one lesson: decentralization increases resilience. That's how we decided to build our Wizzer team. When you're building your first product, you think about scaling code, you think about scaling servers, you think about scaling systems, you think about scaling architecture. But sooner or later, you realize one thing: if you can't scale the responsibility, you can't scale the organization. Traditional teams sounds good on paper: front end team, back end team, ops team, DevOps team. But in practicality, they create walls. Specs gets thrown over the fences. This team is waiting on that team. Some team is not clear what is their goal. Some team is depending on other to fix a bug. Nobody owns the outcome, and the end result velocity die. Not because people are slow, because the ownership is completely fragmented. At Wizzer, we knew that we couldn't let that happen. In order to truly build a platform which scales 10 million, we knew that we needed more than engineering, we needed responsibility at scale. That's why I'm introducing you to the pod model. A pod isn't a team in a classical sense, it's a mission driven unit. Each unit owns a problem statement, an area of the product, and not just the tech layer. Pods are cross functional. They do front end, back end, infra, data, DevOps, everything, whatever needs to be done. Pods at Wizzer are structured like startups. They build, they deploy, they fix. They don't pass the bug, they own the outcome. So let's dissect a pod. A pod has a lead, a full stack engineer, maybe one or two interns, and an optional QA. Sometimes this QA is shared across the pods to hold a larger and bigger context around the pods. Let me give you a few examples of the pods. We have one StratOps pod. This pod is responsible for creating strategies, deploying strategies, containerization of the strategies, the entire life cycle of the strategy, from creating to deployment to management, from CI/CD pipelines to front end to back end to the infra layer, is entirely owned by this pod. Then we have marketing infra pod. This pod is responsible and owns the entire end-to-end infrastructure, from physical lease lines coming from exchanges to delivering the tick data to clients, SDK strategies, and the front-end analytics dashboard. Whether it is APIs, whether it is database, or the Python SDK, they own everything. Another example of pod is back office pod. This pod is responsible for all the integrations which are revolving around back office. Example, KYC onboarding. Whether it is digital KYC, whether the integration of Aadhaar or CDSL or KRA, they own everything. Each pod designs independently, deploys independently, scales independently, fix independently. No more waiting on others. So what inspired us to build the pod model? While building Wizzer as a distributed system, we realized that decentralization brings resilience. Just like we have principles for system design, similarly, we structured the Wizzer pods around 5 basic principles. First is end-to-end ownership. Second, service boundaries, not tickets. Pods run services, they don't run backlogs, which simply means that pod owns the entire area of the product. It's not just the ticket, it's not just the outcome, it's not just the bug. Whether it is customer interaction, whether it is delivery, whether it is infra, they own everything. Third, freedom with accountability. Every pod is free to choose its own tech stack and tool, but you are supposed to be accountable and responsible. That's why every time a new tool or a new tech stack is about to be decided, all the pods come together to discuss whether this tool or the tech stack is going to add any value to the team or not. If yes, then pod is free to choose, and then they are supposed to own it. Fourth, autonomy, not isolation. Just like Amazon, we have decided that pods will talk to each other via APIs, not meetings. Every pod, since owns the area of the product, they expose APIs and SDKs which can be consumed by other areas of the product. That's why we are our own consumers. Fifth, speed. Every pod is supposed to shift fast, fix fast. You are supposed to make constant and consistent improvements. Just like everything, the pod model isn't perfect, and we also had to embrace the trade-off. Trade-offs like communication overheads, duplicate solution by this multiple pods, cheaper onboarding for the new engineers. That's why we built an entire onboarding journey for the new engineers. Whether you are an intern, whether you are a QA, or whether you are a lead, you have to go through the same onboarding journey. And a higher bar for the leadership. At Wizzer, leadership is not just about number of experience. That's why the lead, the full stack engineer, or even sometimes the QA, they keep shuffling their roles inside a pod so that they get a 360-degree overview of the entire outcome and the ownership. As the Wizzer grows, so will the pod model. In the future, we will see specialized pods. For example, quant pod, strategy deployment pod, clear maturity paths for the pod from junior to critical. We are also thinking about creating a pod for the platform engineering. This pod will be responsible to empower the other pods. At Wizzer, pods aren't just an org chart, they are our engineering strategy. In capital markets, it's not just about building fast, it's about building well and enduring the storm. This is the pod model, this is Wizzer Engineering.